right, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I hope you're well. Welcome to Memoi's first Dev Hour session. Um, maybe just a brief introduction. My name is Gerald Sule. I'm your host for today. And as we get started, let me just give you a brief overview of what Memoi is and what we do and what we hope to achieve in a nutshell. So here at Memoi, we're a community of developers as well as founders in anything in the tech space, basically. If you're in AI, you're in blockchain, you're in cybersecurity, you're welcome here. Let's discuss, let's learn more about tech, and also let's also continue sharing and contributing to the community as a whole. And like I mentioned before, my name is Gerald. I'm your host for today, and I'm here with a colleague of mine and a very good friend as well called Jason Waigwa, and I think I'll let him introduce himself as well, just to say more about him, who he is, what he does, and some of the experiences that he's had. So over to you, Jason.
Okay, thank you very much, Gerard. Yeah, so my name is Jason Moiko, as Gerard has mentioned, and I'm a project coordinator at iLab Africa under the cybersecurity department. So we deal with a lot of research, cybersecurity, in the field of cybersecurity, that is. Also things like vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, among many others. And I'm so happy to be here, and it's a big pleasure, and a big thanks to Memory for hosting me.
All right, thank you, Jason. Maybe more about myself as well. What I do in Memoi is I'm the technical lead at Memoi. So everyone who's interested in trainings, in anything to do with hackathons as well, I'm the person to see as well with the rest of the team who I know you'll be interacting with as well. So maybe just a brief overview of today's topic. As you can see, we're talking about your identity, your rules, and building decentralized ID solutions. And I'm sure a number of you in the blockchain space, maybe you've heard about this once or twice, but you're always like, what exactly is this? What does it mean? And what 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 does it entail? How does it help me? So maybe before we get started, I don't know, Jason, um, just a quick question from my end. When you think about identity, maybe in a digital space, what comes to mind for you?
Okay, so maybe just to outline what identity means in a digital world is, well, I can try and compare it to the normal identity where, for instance, I want to go and withdraw some money from the M-Pesa. So I have to produce my national ID. They check the details on the ID, the person that is there, that is a photo, and proceed with my transaction. But when you look at the digital aspect of it, is where now everything evolves around technology. Like you don't need a third-party person to verify if this user or if this user is the user that I'm seeing in front of me. So we have this authentication that enables us to transact in the online or in the digital platforms and digital environments.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But maybe another thing I would ask is there like a difference between digital identity and a decentralized identity?
A digital identity and decentralized.
Yeah.
Well, when you bring in the decentralization, this means that you know this identity or this information, it's not under one, they call it database or central database, where in case something comes up, in case the system is down, you like you can't be assisted, or there's no any service that will offer to you. But when you look into the decentralized identity, you find that you as the user, you're in charge of your identity. Like there's no third parties associated with this form of identity in between there. Because when you look at the normal identity, you find that we have things like fraud. We've experienced fraud here and there where someone pretends to, digital identity theft, for instance. Someone steals an ID, they fake the details there, and then they masquerade as the user who was intended to do that. But when you have the decentralized one, we eliminate all those challenges that come in between when you're trying to prove your identity to, when you want to transact and want to do something like that.
Yeah. I think when you said that, I think the first thing that came to mind for me would be, well, looking about digital identity, I'm guessing you mean something like my Google account, for example, how I log into various platforms. Yeah. So in that sense, from what I'm getting is, in the normal digital space, when you're interacting with these companies and their websites, they own your identity, or basically they own your data. But in a decentralized way, you can still interact in the internet, in the digital space, but you control who has access to that data. Yeah.
Data, yes, specific data that is.
Yeah, I think that's pretty amazing. I think from my experience as well, since I'm also a blockchain dev, I have interacted with decentralized systems here and there, and I think that was one of the key takeaways that came across for me. I think even as we go through more sessions of dev hours, we build on top of this and show how exactly this works. I think getting those basics is actually pretty important, because I think a misconception we have is when you have like a password or two-factor authentication, people think that's decentralized, but it's not actually, because that data isn't yours. And maybe another thing I would ask would be, how exactly does it benefit us in the tech space? Maybe as users or as developers, what's the big thing or the important thing about decentralized technologies?
Okay, so that is, are we comparing it to the centralized or just the normal digital, the decentralized?
Comparing it to like the centralized identities, like what are the advantages that come up with decentralized IDs, and what benefits does that bring for us?
Okay, so with decentralized, what I can say about it is, okay, I can talk about privacy. So when you talk about privacy, like you mentioned, when you're logging into Google, they have your documents, all the details basically. But when you go to the decentralized identity, you find that you as the user, you only share the necessary information that you can share with the person who is preserving, basically what is happening here is that aspect of preserving privacy. Like you don't just share everything with everyone, but you share only the required information or the required data with the person. And then when I bring in now security, we have, when you talk about decentralized, we have things like cryptographic methods that come into place in terms of blockchain to secure that is the identity of the data that you're sharing. So the security is kind of, well, it's more advanced and it's well secured when you're interacting, transacting online compared to the normal transaction kind of thing. So yeah, there is minimization of data breaches and unauthorized kind of access.
Yeah, I think that's actually a key point to bring up as well. I think maybe just to add to that in terms of how it's beneficial, I've been seeing a lot of governments moving into trying to see how can we have a form of digital identity for our citizens, maybe to give them better access to services and the likes. And I think that's also an opportunity for people working on decentralized identity solutions to come into the space and actually benefit the people as well. I think one key aspect I was thinking about is also in terms of like academic credentials as well, in terms of being able to actually control that data yourself, and also having a way of trusting and verifying that what we've come up with is genuinely valid, and actually it's not something that is easily faked. Like you're eliminating that element of fraud, which I think is really important. Even before we get into the technical aspects, maybe one thing I would also want to ask would be, we've talked so much about the benefits, about decentralized technologies and decentralized IDs, but are there any drawbacks? Like, what do you think are some of the reasons that maybe people are afraid to adopt this technology, or maybe unwilling to some extent?
Okay, thank you. So when you talk about drawbacks with decentralized identity, it's, let me say, it's a new technology that has just come up. So you find that getting people to trust, like, because you see how we are, you find that I need to trust this platform that I'm using. So how to convince a user that we have this very secure platform. It can do 1, 2, 3. You can only choose. Basically, you own your data, so you can choose who you want to share with and all that. So having people to trust you or to trust that new technology that is coming up.
Yeah, I think that's key. Maybe another thing to mention, just on top of what you added, would be that I think also there's a huge learning curve when it comes to dealing with decentralized technologies, which I think a number of people have experienced. But maybe as I give you time to also review that, maybe I think this is what we meant when we were looking at the difference between decentralized identities and centralized identities, based on my understanding of it, in terms of, in the normal scenario in every day, for example, if you're in a bank or if it's your social media account, you'd find that you have an account with one organization. So maybe you have an account with Facebook, you have an account with Instagram, you have an account with Twitter, and each of these companies owns the data that's associated with your account. You don't have any control with it, and they get to share that information with whoever they see fit. However, the challenge is that is, number one, if there's a data breach, you find that you didn't have any control over that data, or if they decide to sell it. Those are some of the challenges we have in terms of our privacy and security when referencing our data. And maybe another thing I'd like to mention as well would be, you also don't have control over who you share that information with outside of these companies. So that was maybe the first level of how we came to decentralized identities. Then everyone knows about the federated model. For example, you're in LinkedIn, you want to sign, it tells you sign in with Google. Maybe you're opening an account on another website, maybe it's something like BuzzFeed, or maybe a newspaper site, then it tells you log in with Google. So you find that one company serves as an identity provider, which is an IDP in this sense, just based on what we have on the screen currently. And this company now controls all of that data, such that it's maybe to you, you think now it's easier for me to manage so many accounts just through one entry point. However, the challenge with this is, from a security standpoint, you now have one single point of failure. If this identity provider, whether it's Google or whether it's Facebook or whoever it is, if their services go down or become unavailable, you lose access to all of your accounts. And in terms of your own data privacy, in terms of your own autonomy, you find that this would become a challenge for you, because you don't know who this company is sharing your data with. And that's also some of the key things that we're trying to look at and change in terms of decentralized identities and why we want to build them, as we look into other various use cases that come about. And just as I'm alluding to that, when we talk about identity in blockchain, we're talking about self-sovereign identity. We say that it's self-sovereign because, number one, you have the control over your own data. And another thing would be that you also now have a record of, okay, the data that I have can't be tampered with because it's a blockchain and these are a series of redundant ledgers across multiple nodes or instances that makes it such that this can be tampered with as well. And as we continue going through this discussion the next few sessions as well, just like I mentioned, this is just the kickoff of, as we look at how do we exactly build decentralized identities, we look at, for example, when we talk about, maybe I have the data in the blockchain, but I don't want everyone to see it so specifically. There's something we talk about called zero knowledge proofs, whereby you can share proof of your identity or proof of that data without having to explicitly say, okay, let me give you an example. Maybe you're going somewhere and you're looking for government services, but maybe you're not comfortable sharing details about your full name, where you were born, your age, your gender, and stuff like that. You just want to prove that I'm a citizen of this country and I'm able to get these services. So what will happen is that data or that information about you would be queried, and the output that you get basically says yes or no to if this person is a citizen, without having to get too much information about you, because that's also a concern we're having in terms of, we go to some places and they ask for more information than they need, and perhaps us as individuals are not very comfortable with that. So that's one of the key things that we were looking at in terms of how exactly decentralized technology works. So I think on that note, even as we continue with the discussion, another thing that I wanted to mention is now in terms of still on decentralized technologies and how they work, is in terms of, when we think about identity, we look at it so linearly. We think about it in terms of, okay, number one, what are my login credentials, my user accounts? And if you look at this, there's so many different ways to look at it in terms of, there's a proof of social identity. An example would be your social media accounts. Maybe you want to be able to move from one social media to another without having to change your posts or having to repost the same thing over and over again. That data can be picked up. Or maybe you just want to prove your reputation. Maybe you're an influencer, you have a brand, and you're trying to protect it, from people who are trying to impersonate you or maybe hack you as well. You find that through this Web3 identities, you'd find that that specific account that you have can now be validated across multiple social channels, which will help protect you as well. And just as like a tidbit, you'd find that it's something that's new, but it's being adopted slowly. For example, we all saw what happened with Twitter and Threads, but it's interesting to know that Threads, now the one that is linked to your Instagram account, is also built on the blockchain, ideally. So that's also something interesting that's coming up within the ecosystem that maybe a lot of people are not aware of as well. We can look at proof of creation. Maybe you're an artist, you're a writer, you're a painter. I'm sure everyone knows about NFTs at this point, but you'll find that there's so much more to blockchain and what it can do beyond NFTs. For example, maybe you want something more complex in terms of maybe a system where you want to protect people's intellectual property in a more robust way that actually follows a legal framework that you can implement on the blockchain. Not just saying that, okay, this data is on the blockchain, it has a unique code, everyone knows it's there. That's important, but it's not the end all be all in terms of your IP. There's also regulations that need to come into account. And you find that through decentralized technologies and self-sovereign identity tools, you can come up with that framework and enable people to continue to build more robust systems to protect your intellectual property. Same for proof of funds, in terms of this is the money that I have. And this also links really well with KYCs as well, in terms of regulations for different levels within the blockchain. You'd find that, for starters, if an exchange, something like Binance is being regulated, you find that this protocol also allows people and the DEXs to be tracked and regulated. Then that's one of the key things that we were looking at. So maybe just as I continue, so those are some of the key things that we were looking at in terms of different benefits of decentralized technologies and identities. Another thing would now be social reputation, which goes hand in hand with what we were talking about when we were looking at social identities, when we were talking about proof of personhood and the likes. So, and also proof of interaction, just to show you know, I know everyone in the blockchain space has been through this, or at least most of you, but for those in Web 2 in transitioning, you'd find that there are things we call POAPs, or proof of attendance. So maybe you've gone for a meet and greet with one of your favorite influencers or role models. Personally, I'm a football fan. I saw Messi won the Ballon d'Or yesterday, so I'm like, if he's having an event and I was there, I'm able to get a record that says, you know what, you've interacted with him on this day and the likes, and that can be validated on the blockchain as well. So those are just different ways of looking at identity in a blockchain setting as well. So as I continue with that, you find that another thing that would be interesting is now just self-sovereign identity as a whole and what it actually means. So for example, when we talk about digital identity, this is a model that we use. The reason we do this is because there needs to be a standard that we follow that can be replicated across multiple blockchains. Because you know, we're moving from the space in the blockchain or decentralized space whereby every blockchain is in a silo, and that wouldn't be very ideal in a identity scenario. So we're trying to come up with a model that can be used in multiple blockchain settings or ecosystems, but can be interoperable or can be used across. And that's why models like this come about. So whereby you allow individuals to take control of their own data, and also trying to just basically expand the ecosystem as well. And in this particular space, you'd find that this allows information to be shared securely and selectively with third parties without the need for a central authority. And in this SSI system, there are basically a number of principles, but the key thing is in terms of the components and the people involved. And when we look at SSI, there's basically this particular rules whereby you can be an individual who holds an identity and receives credentials through it. You can be an agent or an entity that issues these credentials, or you can be someone who verifies it. So those are just some of the key things that we were looking at in terms of just introducing what decentralized identity is, some of the solutions that we would like to build, as well as maybe what's the future looking like? What are we trying to achieve, or what are we trying to allow people to be able to experience or interact with? So through that, you'll find that there's also a number of blockchain tools and technologies that we can use to enable us to do this. And I think some of the tools or the stacks are available in EVM or Ethereum compatible chains. An example is Polygon ID, which we'll be looking at in the next session in terms of how do we actually set up a project that takes advantage of these particular concepts in SSI as well. So maybe just another question that I would ask Jason, just as I was talking about some of the key components of decentralized identity, some of the key roles that people have, and maybe how the whole model fits together. Is there anything that you're currently working on in the blockchain space that fits into this as well? I know we've discussed a number of projects and maybe some we've also worked on together, but maybe I'd like to hear more from you about what are you currently working on and what was the idea behind it? What motivated this, basically?
Okay, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So, maybe to mention some of the projects or project that I'm working on that is in relation to blockchain. Um, we have a number of projects that we collaborated with you especially. So there's one main project that we are currently looking into, which mainly deals with the healthcare. So how to secure a patient's records in a way that also not even just securing. You see, the reason why we came up with this specific project, so that I can also like drive to where it is. Normally, when you fall sick and probably you had traveled to, let's say, from Nairobi, now you're in somewhere like, let's say, Mombasa or any other town in the country, then you find that you've fallen sick and probably you go to a hospital, like for instance, Aga Khan or Nairobi Hospital, and then they don't have a branch in the place where you are. So what happens is probably it could be a recurring kind of sickness that you've been having. But in this case, it knocked you out to a point that you can't even speak. So you go to the hospital, the doctors have to like, go through your tests, like try and identify what could be the problem to you as a patient. So that is where now the idea came in. So what this project does is you have the patient's record in one location where the patient is the one who identifies like what information will be shared with the doctor. So for instance, something like the medical record. So the doctor can have access to a patient's record and see the illness, the medications that they've been having. In case anyone has any allergies, they can be able to identify that without having to do a whole new diagnosis for you as a patient. So that is something that brought us, or that made us come up with this idea of decentralized health record or health kind of health record system, which tracks every medical record.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jay. Um, I think he just dropped off, but he'll be joining us shortly. But I think just to add to that, because it's a project that I've been able to collaborate on with him as well, in terms of in terms of healthcare and blockchain. So maybe some of the key things that came up with that was interesting is finding out that there's so many different approaches and avenues that you can take when it comes to building such a solution in terms of healthcare and decentralized technologies. One of the key challenges was the whole question of should it be on a private chain, should it be on a private chain, or maybe something of a hybrid setup. So that's one of the key things that came up, and also the whole regulatory issue, because with data and healthcare, like data is gold and it's important to protect people's data, and what's the best way to go about that? So finding out different ways to navigate that using SSI tools has been such an interesting and great experience. But I feel like even as we continue with this series, because the next step is actually just a technical walkthrough of how exactly do you set up a project and how do you think about it in terms of using SSI technology and what blockchain works well for you and what are some of the key considerations you need to have. So I think thank you for that, Jay. Maybe something I can mention is also there's a project that I'm currently working on as well. That's now with the Africa Blockchain Center. We're building basically a verifiable credentials tool such that any organization that comes up can also use this as a plug-and-play setup to some extent. So what that would mean, for example, is that maybe you want to issue different types of credentials. Maybe they're for healthcare, maybe they're for academic records. There's so much that you can do with that. And I think one of the key outcomes that came through that, for example, is like what I'm sharing now in terms of the Powerland project, where you find that you can use SSI to actually issue credentials to students, because not everyone is going to have a degree or a master's, but there needs to be a way to verify the skills that they've learned to multiple stakeholders such that they're able to actually benefit from their learning and education. So with the PLP project, it's been such an amazing experience seeing how it's been coming up and how they're implementing decentralized technology and SSI to basically give students an identity on the blockchain and also help it such that they can receive credentials and basically prove the validity of these credentials. So I think those are some of the key things that I was looking at when it comes to what are the real world use cases of SSI, even before we get to the technical sessions, even before we start building. I think it's key for us to capture and understand that it's not just some cool technology that you come across, you talk about, and basically you're done. There's so many avenues in terms of building and exploring and growing and actually impacting the community around you. And even as we continue, we'll have a lot more guests and more people interacting with us and telling us more about, okay, this is what we are building and this is how we went about it. So I think maybe I'll open it up to Jay in terms of, we've talked a lot about blockchain technology and what it can do, the benefits, the disadvantages, the real world use cases. But maybe as from your background as a cybersecurity expert as well, when you talk about decentralized identity and data, one of the key things that comes up is also the question about user privacy, which you've discussed, and security as well. So are there any other ways that we can look at decentralized identity, or maybe even decentralized technology as a whole, that can benefit the existing security landscape? I mean, it's Cyber Security Awareness Month. It might be the last day, but we're still in October. So I think it was also relevant to ask this question, like, what other avenues do you think security can benefit from this technology?
Okay, so let me get your question clear. You've asked
What other ways can blockchain and decentralized identity technology be used to improve security in terms of the digital space?
Okay. Okay. So maybe I can talk about user privacy. So under user privacy, what I can say is when we're talking about matters privacy, we've had many concerns in the past few weeks where guys have been sued. You know, we have the Office of the Data Protection. So we have these issues where, let's say, for instance, you use my image. You know, it's a personal identifier. So you use my image out there without permission, and then someone comes in and they sue you, then you get hefty bills. So when you talk about privacy with SSI, we have the aspect of data minimization, where only you collect you collect the only details of the only data that is required, meaning you don't need to get unnecessary information from users that in case, for instance, they might land on the wrong hands, it might lead to user data privacy breach and all that. Then we have the aspect of selective disclosure, where, for instance, when we are talking about the health, so there are some information that, personal information that won't be visible to the public, but you as the user, you're the only one who can see it. So we have that aspect under the user privacy. Then we have the aspect of data encryption. We talked about protocols where you encrypt, where data is encrypted, that is in transit or when you are accessing this specific data. So it is encrypted to a way that no unauthorized personnel can be able to access your data without consent. So basically, we have this in place. Then when we talk about user security, we have things like the multi-factor authentication. So basically, you need to have like another device there with you that you can use to authenticate, not just the the normal login credentials that you're used to. So you need to have another authentication, basically a blanket security that aligns with probably the password that you already have in place. So we have a number of them. We go through things like the secure development practice, where you follow the proper coding practices, the likes. So yeah, we have those among many others.
All right, thank you. I was seeing a comment from Nick in the chats, basically saying how he likes the point you made about seamless logins or basically access, which is actually pretty true in terms of what we can achieve through this. I think those are all of the questions that we received. I think I also want to thank you for the time that you spent just taking us through basically your thoughts and experiences about what decentralized identity is, the different models that are there, and how exactly it can benefit us as well. So thank you for that. Maybe as we're coming to the end of this particular session, one thing I'd like to mention is this was just the beginning of a number of things that we'll be doing in terms of Dev Hour. Dev Hour is basically a space where developers and techies alike can come together, share information about the different technologies that we're using, basically give more technical walkthroughs or rundowns of exactly how they work and our thoughts about them as well. So this is the first session, and I'm glad to have spent it with all of you guys. Maybe another thing I'll mention is I can't wait for next week, because next week is a part 2 of what we started today in terms of decentralized technologies. I know today is an introduction. We've talked about what SSI is, why we need digital or decentralized identities, but the next session is about, okay, let's look at the different tools that we can use. And the first one you want to talk about is Polygon ID. This is one of the chains in the Ethereum ecosystem that basically supports decentralized identities, and they have so many languages that they support. For example, for what we're going to be doing is how do we set up a SSI or decentralized ID project using the Polygon ID stack and JavaScript as well. So I'm really looking forward to that and interacting with you guys a lot more, even as we get into actually building these tools and solutions. So once again, thank you, Jason. I'd like to have you here again. And if you ever want to share more about what you're doing, as well as maybe take us through some technical sessions, you're always welcome as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, it was an honor. I've been the first one to
Yeah, it's great having you as well. I'm sure we'll continue working together on a number of projects in the future as well. Maybe before I end the session, I'd also like to make a couple of comments and remarks as well. Number one is, as much as we have DevOps, we also have amazing projects and events coming up. I think the first thing I'd like to tell you guys about is a hackathon that Memoi Africa is having with Telos next week. So we're doing a boot camp about how do we build in the Telos ecosystem. Then we'll have a hackathon starting from the 13th all the way to the 15th of November. So many devs have already signed up. I think we're already over 100, but there's still so much room for more. I can't wait to see you guys at the hackathon. There's chances to win some amazing prizes as well in terms of the bounties, and also in general just have the chance to build some really amazing projects and interact with amazing devs or techies and other people in the Memoi community as well. If you want more information about what we do as well, there are links to it in our description as well. or even feel free to join our Telegram groups as well and interact with more people from the Momoi community. Another thing is we also have Code Africa coming up towards the end of November, which is going to be a virtual hackathon as well as conference. So we'll have a lineup of some amazing speakers and people you can interact with, and more information about this will be shared in our communities as well. So thank you guys. Have a lovely day, evening, depending on where you are. But cheers for interacting with us today.